Good morning, Bitcoin. Today is Monday, May 17th, 2020. My name is Thomas Hunt, and this is the World Crypto Network. The price of Bitcoin is up 4.53% in the last 24 hours, with a last of 9,830, a high of 9,883, and a low of 9,262. That's $1 for 10,172 Satoshis. Volume is rather low, but it is a Sunday, with 6,928 Bitcoins trading hands. Margin longs continue to lead the day even after the halving, with 81% of the market heading that direction. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Today is Big Book Day. So we're going to start out with a reading, as usual, from Charles Bukowski. The Walls. After you've hit the bars for a while, drinking, going back to your room with a fat mama, doing it, sleeping, to awaken in the morning to find your wallet gone. Again. No job, no food, no rent, just a hangover and dark, peeling walls. After you've hit the bars for a while, you carry your wallet in the front pocket. You carry a blade. You carry most of your bills in your shoe. You go to the crapper to make a withdrawal. It gets so ingrained that even when you go to your room alone, you automatically hide your wallet and your money, and upon awakening, you spend hours searching. It gets so ingrained that often when you're drinking with a woman you trust, one who is living with you, you often awake her to tell her, "Shit, I can't find my wallet." "Now you know it's here," she says. "You've just hidden it somewhere." And after some hours you find it. In the old days there were some strange times. Once, going into a library to return some books, you stopped the librarian just as she was taking the books away. "Just a moment, please." You saw an edge of green, and you opened the book and pulled 3 20s and a 10. Another time, in a Texas rooming house after a night of ferocious drinking, the next morning you found your wallet, but not the money. The rent was due, and you told the landlady you had lost your money somewhere. Coming in after a sad walk in the streets. The landlady met you. She had a handful of green, and she said, "Mr. Chanowski, I was vacuuming your room, and the vacuum kept hitting a bump in the rug. And I pulled the rug back, and there it was, an honest, lovely lady." Luckily, after that, I met more honest, lovely ladies, some who even put money in my wallet. I'm not a misogynist, being only $200 or $300 out, but I have special reservations about those fat mamas of the streets, because I think when the unkindest crime of all is when the poor rob the poor, after talking and drinking and laughing and making love, one leaving the other broke and hung over, to awaken like that in some strange city, alone, within dark and peeling walls. That's a good one, huh? Didn't know where it was going, right? But at the end, boy, does he get there. Because I think the unkindliest crime of all is when the poor rob the poor after drinking and talking and laughing and making love, one leaving the other broke and hung over, to awaken like that in some strange city, alone, within dark and peeling walls. I just like that part at the end. I thought that was dynamite. The poor shouldn't rob the poor. He's right on there. Let's see. Oh, I've read Sparks to you before. I love Sparks. Let's see. Interesting. Let's see. The Last Generation. It was much easier to be a genius in the 20s. There was only 3 or 4 literary magazines, and if you got into them 4 or 5 times, you could end up in Gertie's parlor. You could possibly meet Picasso for a glass of wine, or maybe only Miro. And yes, if you sent your stuff postmarked from Paris, chances of publication became much better. Most writers bottomed their manuscripts with the word Paris and the date. And with a patron, there was time to write, eat, drink, and take drives to Italy and sometimes Greece. It was good to be photoed with others of your kind. It was good to look tidy, enigmatic, and thin. Photos taken on the beach were great. And yes, you could write letters to the 15 or 20 or so others, bitching about this and that. You might get a letter from Ezra, or from Hem. Ezra liked to give directions, and Hem liked to practice his writing in his letters when he couldn't do the other. It was a romantic, grand game then, full of the fury of discovery. Now there are so many of us, hundreds of literary magazines, hundreds of presses, thousands of titles. Who is to survive out of all this mulch? It's almost improper to ask. I go back. I read the books about the lives of the boys and the girls of the 20s. If they were the lost generation, what would you call us, sitting here among the warheads with our electric touch typewriters? The last generation? I'd rather be lost than last, but as I read these books about them, I feel a gentleness and a generosity. As I read of the suicide of Harry Crosby in his hotel room with his whore, that seems as real to me as the faucet dripping now in my bathroom sink. I like to read about them. Joyce, blind and prowling the bookstores like a tarantula, they said. Dos Passos, with his clipped newscasts using a pink typewriter ribbon. D.H., horny and pissed off. H.D., being smart enough to use her initials, which seemed much more literary than Hilda Doolittle. G.B. Shaw, long established and noble and dumb as royalty, flesh and brain turning to marble, a bore. Huxley, promenading his brain with the greatest glee, arguing with Lawrence that it wasn't in the belly and the balls, that the glory was in the skull. And that hick, Sinclair Lewis, coming to light. Meanwhile, the revolution being over, the Russians were liberated and dying. Gorky with nothing to fight for, sitting in a room, trying to find phrases praising the government. Many others broken in victory. Now there are so many of us, but we should be grateful. For in 100 years, if the world is not destroyed, think how much there will be left of all this. Nobody really able to fail or to succeed, just relative merit, diminished further by our numerical superiority. We will all be catalogued and filed, all right. If you have any doubts of those other golden times, there were other curious creatures, Richard Aldington, Teddy Dreiser, F. Scott, Hart Crane, Wyndham Lewis, the Black Sun Press. But to me, the 20s centered mostly on Hemingway coming out of the war and beginning to type. It was all so simple, all so deliciously clear. Now, there are so many of us. Ernie, you had no idea how good it had been 4 decades later when you blew your brains into the orange juice. Although I grant you, that was not your best work. Oh, dark ending, Bukowski. Ernie, you had no idea how good it had been 4 decades later when you blew your brains into the orange juice. Although I grant you, that was not your best work. Ouch, ouch, Bukowski. Let's see, maybe one more. 3 is a nice round number. It isn't, but it's also very dark back here. It's kind of hard to read, really. Overhead mirrors. I wouldn't say it was a particularly low time. It was a time, and I tried to adjust spiritually to most matters, which meant not expecting much and not getting much. But sickness is another matter. I was living in a cheap court in Hollywood, in between women, and I was buying coke, really low-grade crap, sniffing that with beer and scotch. I got mentally very depressed and physically sick. I couldn't eat. It got so I just ingested coke, scotch, and beer. One morning it really got to me. I was trembling, having visions. I couldn't even drink water. I was dying. The only friends I had were a nudie dancer and a guy who operated a porno bookstore. They came by. "Listen, this is it," I told them. "I'm dying." "We'll fix you up," said the porno bookstore guy, who was also selling me the watered-down coke. The nudie dancer shacked with him. He came back with something pink in a bottle. "Take this," he said. Pages stuck together. All right. That was about noon. About 6 p.m., the phone rang. I picked it up. "Yes?" It was the porno guy. "Hank?" "Yes." "Listen, Babs and I aren't working tonight. We're going to a motel with overhead mirrors and X-rated TV. We're going to relax and fuck." "Good luck." "I know you're sick, so we're going to give you the phone number at the motel so you can call us in case of trouble." "Sure." "Got a pencil?" "Yeah. It's..." He gave me the number. I didn't have a pencil. I couldn't move. "Thanks," I said. ... It was one of those nights you remember. If you don't fight death, it will just move in. At times I got up and walked around, turned the radio on and off, flushed the toilet now and then, ran all the faucets in the place and then shut them off, turned the lights off and on, got back out of the bed, rested but not too long, got up, sipped water out of the tap, sat in a chair and took some coins out of my pocket and counted them. 25, 26, 27 cents. I kept turning the water off and on, the lights off and on, counting the coins and also very sensibly putting one shoe parallel to the other shoe, and so forth. As I went about my business, I noticed that the clock hardly moved. The time was always the same, 3:21 a.m. Then, all at once, within a minute, I noticed light coming in under the blinds, daylight arriving. And when I saw that, I felt a bit better, went to bed, and slept flat on my belly as usual. The next night, I was sitting on my couch drinking a beer and eating a fried egg sandwich between 2 slices of very dry bread, when my friends, the nudie dancer and the porno guy, came in. "How you feeling?" "Okay, except it's my last beer and I'm broke." "Shit, man, come on down to our place. We've got plenty of everything." They did. Lovely place. I stayed with the beer, except for 2 vodka 7s and 1 little yellow pill. And they had the stereo on, but not too loud. I stayed, smoked 2 bombers, drank 18 or 19 beers, thanked them, and then walked back home. The next morning, I didn't poop. I got up, took a good crap, took a lukewarm bath, dressed, and walked to the corner of Hollywood and Western. Put a dime in the box and got a Herald Examiner, remembering decades back when there was a newspaper in L.A. called the Herald Express and another called the Examiner, and they merged rather than kill each other off. And carrying that paperback, I felt I'd lived a long time, though not a very wonderful one. I took the paper back to my place, sat on the couch, and began to read it, fascinated, finally, with what the other people were doing. Kind of a long one about sickness. Interesting ending as well. I sat on the couch and began to read it, fascinated, finally, with what the other people were doing. And it's strange when you're sick, you can't really think much about anything but being sick, as Bukowski is showing us here. He tries to distract himself, turning the faucets on and off and so on and so forth, but these distractions simply won't work. But today is Big Book Day, so here's a preview. We have some big books for you. This one is called Infinite City, a San Francisco atlas. It's not that big, but it is pretty unique. We're going to look at that later. kind of breaks the city up into neighborhoods and tells stories about the neighborhoods. I think there was some 2001 interest, so maybe you'll like Star Wars storyboards. These are from the original trilogy, and these are the actual color and otherwise drawings that the films were later based on. It's pretty neat. One of the guys in this actually goes on to become a big director, the guy that drove the storyboards. I forgot his name, something like Joe Jonas, but he directed Gremlins and Small Soldiers. So he's an interesting character. Gremlins is a good film. All right, that book too big was knocking over my stack. Everything's falling over today. But we've also got Picasso for you. This is from the Masterpieces from the Musée National Paris of Picasso. But I picked it up in San Francisco when the pieces toured, and I got a chance to see them. I went to this exhibit like 2 or 3 times. It's really good. So I look forward to showing you some Picasso pictures and paintings a little bit later. And then we've got just the normal books that I've been reading. So let's go over to the browser and let's check out Goodreads. As you guys know, I'm stuck at home like everybody else. And while I've certainly been watching a lot of brainless TV shows, I've been watching some great movies, but I've also been reading some books, right? And we've got the time. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the books I've read and some of the books that I'm reading. And then I'm going to show you guys some more big books. So one of the books I read recently was Artie Lange, Too Fat to Fish. Check it out. I've even got a hard copy here. I have all the Howard Stern people books, but I haven't read them all. So this is time. He's going to explain the homo bullshit in part 2. But yes, Artie Lange, Too Fat to Fish. It was a fun, light celebrity book. Artie tells his stories. He tries to make them seem funny while not focusing on the realities of the heroin addiction that later destroyed his life. Artie's back again now, though. He's been to rehab and is hopefully working on another book with more stories. Artie's stories are great, but in the end, he gambles way too much, he does way too many drugs, and he wastes all his money and eventually loses his job at the Howard Stern Show. So it's a very sad ending for Artie, but it's nice to recap and think of maybe nicer times when Artie was, well, maybe not more in control, but we didn't know about it as much. Maybe that made the difference. Another book I read is Batman, Frank Miller. It's called The Dark Knight Strikes Again. And this was a weird one. It was weird in both the artwork. That's kind of Batman's partner. She's kind of like Catgirl, but not really. Or Catwoman, something. She's like a Robin, one of the Robins. It had the Flash in it. You know, it had all the DC characters. But the plot really drifted all over the place. It's supposed to be like the other ones or like The Watchmen or something, just kind of a grand, cosmic, amazing plot. Superman seems to have a daughter at this point. She's ultra powerful. I think it's his daughter with Wonder Woman. I mean, if you want to talk about the good, I mean, there's just not enough Batman in this book. Here's a little bit of Batman. Most of the book is about Superman or other superheroes trying to fight this thing, trying to save the day. And then Batman comes back at the end. It's just really weird. It's not his best. I did like the parts where Batman was hooking up with Wonder Woman, though. That was pretty amazing. Or, sorry, Superman. Superman hooking up with Wonder Woman, which makes way more sense. Also, there was an interesting, and I think Kevin Smith would love this, discussion of Superman telling his daughter about sex. And he said, just as Kevin Smith would have wanted him to, he said, "Never with a Terran, they're too weak." So there's some good things even in a not great book. Another one I'm reading right now, and it's difficult. It's called Consider the Lobster by David Foster Wallace. And of course, David Foster Wallace wrote Infinite Jest. That's a great book, very difficult to read. It's a 1,000-page novel with lots of footnotes. This book is much the same, even though these are just essays. So it starts out real easy to trick you into thinking that it's going to be a fun and light read with a fantastic story about the Adult Entertainment Expo in Las Vegas. The expo is held at the same time as the CES convention. Wallace goes. He describes the whole thing in very much detail. That's the Wallace fashion. And you're rolling along thinking it's a fun book of essays. That's when he hits you with the dictionary essay. He's got an essay in here. It's at least 50, 70 pages about dictionaries and about different people who write dictionaries fighting with other people who write dictionaries. And it's interesting. There's a whole subgenre of lexicographers. That's what dictionaries people are called, people who write dictionaries. And they're fighting, right? They're fighting over, there's the prescriptivists, which are kind of like the conservatives. They like no new words, right? So CD-ROM is not a word. All these goofy internet words that they've added to the dictionary, those are all not words. These are the old-fashioned grammar should be the way grammar should be, right? Then you have the descriptivists, and the descriptivists are fighting the prescriptivists. And the descriptivists think that we should just describe reality, that there shouldn't be old-fashioned rules to grammar, but there should be exciting new words like CD-ROM. And trying to think of it, there's a bunch of internet words that have become real. So stuff like that they wouldn't like. They probably wouldn't, because they wouldn't add Bitcoin to the library, right? So these two people are fighting against each other. And Wallace, gosh, you start reading the essay and you're like, I'm never going to make it through this. I have something better to do with my life, right, than to read about dictionaries. But as he says here, what's so great about this dictionary is that he uses an ethical appeal. Here, the adjective described from the Greek ethos doesn't quite mean what we mean when we say ethical, but there are affinities. As Wallace says, what the ethical appeal amounts to is a complex and sophisticated trust me. It's the boldest, most ambitious, and also the most democratic of rhetorical appeals because it requires the rhetor, a word I'd never seen before, to convince us of not just his intellectual acuity or the technical competence, but of his basic decency and fairness and sensitivity to the audience's own hopes and fears. Wallace says the dictionary guy is making one of these. This is exciting, right? He also defines a great term called snoot, S-N-O-O-T, that he uses throughout the thing. It essentially means, and it's from his family. Again, he grew up with a family of writers, right? An English teacher for a mother, this guy. And he says that they're called snoots, syntax nudniks of our times. Snoot comes up over and over again in this essay. I have a couple more highlighted parts. Again, if you guys don't have, I mean, obviously, you know, I have a Kindle, so I do highlights on there. But these are Post-it flags. You might not work in the legal profession. You might not have heard or seen these, but they're kind of like Post-it notes. They're non-destructive flags that you can put on your book. So even if you got it from maybe like the library, or you're going to sell it in the future, or you just don't like writing in books, you can put these little flags on the end of your books, and you can create these quotes and highlights. And as you can see, this book, I mean, I've only read the beginning, kind of like first 100 pages. These flags make this book more valuable, right? This book is different than all the other books because I put flags in it. If you don't have flags, you can use a pen, you can use a highlighter, you can use tabs, or you can bend the pages if you really want to, but that's really not good. So you shouldn't bend the pages of books. But it is a great way to find quotes. As he says here, he's defining the constructivists or the prescriptivists and the descriptivists, the two counterbalancing forces of dictionaries. And let's see, freewheeling. There's a couple other quotes, but again, he's really enamored of this guy Gardner and his new dictionary. And it's not really a dictionary; it's more like a word usage book. So it's more like arguing why the word should be used and what the word should be used for. And he talks about social justice warriors, and he talks about his classes at school, and he gets in a little bit of trouble. He kind of tells people that you should learn what he calls SWE, which is Standard Written English, but you might just call it Standard White English. And he argues in a pragmatic way. He's trying to improve his students, even though he doesn't agree with everything that's going on in the world. He argues pragmatically that his students should learn how to write and express themselves in SWE, even if they don't like SWE, even if they want to argue against it, because the only way that their arguments will be taken seriously is if they can properly communicate using SWE. Naturally, he gets in trouble for this because he's a white man and he's promoting the traditional form of writing English. And so he gets called to the office and that kind of thing. But if you look at it pragmatically, which means, having the best solution, having a workable solution, whatever works, right? You don't have a single ideology. You have a complex ideology that's flexible, right? It's flexible given the situation. Pragmatically, he seems right on to me. Learning how to communicate in standard written English gives you a superpower to communicate your ideas, even if your ideas are against standard written English. So you never know what you're going to learn from a book of essays, especially one by David Foster Wallace. I just finished one of his other books of essays. This one's Consider the Lobster. The other book that I read of his essays was, it's me. It was A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again. And it's Gabriel D. Vine's fault. He got me reading it, even though I had a copy of it earlier. I bought the Kindle version. But it has this fantastic essay about cruises. And I just went on my first and only cruise, really. And, Wallace skewered the cruises. He really had their number. But yes, fantastic essay. That book seemed a little more fun than this book, even though Consider the Lobster is a solid title. And I think it refers to a speech he gave at a college commencement. And I think that's going to be good. I look forward to the lobster speech. But yes, that's the book I'm still reading. So we're getting kind of a preview of future attractions here. And I also want to say I'm back into, and I think this time is the time I'm going to learn everything there is to know about MTV. I'm reading this book. It's called I Want My MTV. It's a oral history of MTV. Oral history means interviews. So this is a primary source. When people write books about MTV, history books, they could use this as a source for their interviews. And it's great. It just tells the story of the launch of MTV, how they got the labels to give them the videos that they had for free. Then later, when they were a success, they convinced the labels to spend money on the videos to give them better videos. Great story. All the best interviews, all the behind the scenes drugs and madness and what have you. There's a great scene where they need to get a transponder, or they have an extra transponder and they're going to sell it to CNN so that they can sell ads for CNN and MTV at the same time because they're having trouble selling ads. And he goes to Ted Turner and he's about to make the deal for the transponder. And Ted Turner says, "I want to smoke a peace pipe with you." And he takes him upstairs. And the guy says, "Ted always had good weed." And they smoke the weed together and they make the deal. And CNN gets a transponder, a satellite thing. And MTV gets to sell ads for themselves and CNN, essentially saving the music video channel. They needed those ads badly. But yeah, that's a great little story. Lots of little stories like that. Details from music videos I haven't seen that I want to watch in the future. I didn't really have MTV back in the day, but I wanted it. So yeah, totally enjoying this. It's a big oral history. If I can finish this, I want to work on the Daily Show oral history next. Very good. I love oral histories. And again, if you want to read a fun oral history, one that's not real, World War Z. World War Z, not the movie. I haven't seen the movie. I'm sure it's fine. Brad Pitt, whatever. But Max Brooks, son of Mel Brooks, I know, wrote World War Z, and it's an oral history of the zombie wars, meaning that he goes back afterwards, fictionally, and interviews, fictionally, these people. So it's them telling you the story. And for someone who's read a lot of oral history, it just rings real, right? They're telling you stories about real zombies. So very cool, World War Z. Check that out. I think we're going to go to a big book right now before we go to some Kindle books and maybe some Kindle notes, like I showed you guys before. Our first big book is the Picasso book from the Musée Paris. This is Dora Maar, one of Picasso's girlfriends or wives. And again, she's the one that always ends up like this picture on the right, kind of disfigured, multiple eyes, stacked, flat face. She's one of those. So really cool to see a lot of those. Let me see if I can find one of the early paintings and what I thought one of the most moving ones. It's Picasso's friend, and it's a sad painting. His friend has committed suicide, And Picasso has painted him by candlelight. See, this book should have marks in it, then I could find it. But he's painted him by candlelight. It's one of his first early paintings. It's still a little realistic, but there's just something about the light that Picasso has drawn coming off of the candle, and something about the sadness of his friend's death. That it's just really a magnificent and fantastic early painting. Of course, I can't find it now to save for my life, and I'm finding every other. Okay, I found it. Woo, we're out of focus. That's exciting. Really out of focus. Come on, thing. Okay, so here it is. Here's Picasso's friend who passed. There's the candle by his bed, and just the light, the color, different colors of light coming off the candle, the stoic sadness of his friend's face, the possible, I guess we could assume, bullet wound on the head. This is a suicide. I just thought it was very moving painting, and it was a thrill to see it in person in San Francisco. It was at the De Young Museum, where I used to be a member when I lived in San Francisco. And gosh, it was just great. And so many times, I mean, you think of Picasso, you think of, something like this, like a kind of a nonsensical, this is the modernism, the cubists. But he was also a talented, legit artist as well. Like he drew these kind of things because he could, because he wanted to, because he was exploring new ideas and new forms. So it was really interesting, fantastic set of paintings. Sadly or whatever, I don't know. I used it as an excuse not to go to the Musée des Nationaux in Paris. I had a very short amount of time in Paris, and I had to kind of prioritize. I also didn't go to the Musée d'Orsay for the same reason. They toured all their works in San Francisco, so I saw most of their works. I would like to see the train station. I think it's fantastic. But yeah, this is a classic Dora Maar, Picasso cubism, different parts broken up, flatness, a lot going on there. This is La Lecture Reading. So that's what that one's called. And he also did physical sculpture too. This is a goat. I don't know if I can find the picture, but some of the most unique ones at this tribute. Again, this is a full exhibit. This is massive. Is he had one with a bicycle seat and a bicycle handlebar, and he had binded the two together to make a picture of a bull. And it was so simple, but it was so creative. And I was really impressed by that. Some of his sculpture, which again, you wouldn't think, a guy so good at painting, why should he be good at sculpture too? This is a classic one. I think this is Dora Maar, one of his mistresses, but he drew her like a bottle. She's designed to look like a bottle. And this has kind of a negative women as an object kind of feeling to it. Like she's just a bottle you put on a shelf and drink her when you feel like it, but again, just a beautiful image and very interesting. It says, it's Jacqueline with crossed hands. So it's one of his other mistresses or wives. Didn't do any preparation work, so I didn't recap the names of Picasso's mistresses or anything. But great book, big book, one of the museum books. I think I bought the hardback, or I bought the paperback because it's cheaper. So a good way to save a couple bucks at the museum if you can. We're now going to go back to Kindle books and books that I read a long time ago. As I did a few weeks ago, I just want to share some of these news and notes, really notes and highlights, I guess, with the internet. Pause a second. So here are some more of my notes that I made with the Kindle. And this is a two-parted deal where part of it is that we get to read the notes together and think about these books, and I can maybe find you something to read. Another part of this is that by going through this process, I'm actually sharing the notes and making them visible so other people that read this book can maybe learn something from my highlights. So I think it's a great thing to do. I just wish that Goodreads and Amazon Kindle had a make all your notes visible button and an option to make all your notes visible in the future, right? They don't seem to think anyone would want to share using their system. Seems very strange. So this was an interesting book I read a while ago while I was working at startups, and I was trying to make better presentations and help people spend Bitcoin at Purse and other things, So it's called Presenting to Win, The Art of Telling Your Story. And I thought it was pretty straightforward. Instead, they should be following Ludwig von der Rohe's surgically appropriate advice. Less is more. Thought that was a strong highlight. Also, this book about web design has little to do with my business, but its title states my point succinctly. Don't make me think. And when you're designing things for other people to read, it depends what your goal is. If you have a kind of a commercial goal, the way that this book is oriented, you don't want to make them think. If you're like David Foster Wallace, oh boy, you want to make them think. He just used the word rhetor today as a person who is into rhetoric, or a person who is giving rhetoric or defining rhetoric or studying rhetoric. I don't even know, rhetor. So he's made me think about a word I've never seen before or known. So he's definitely making me think. But as this guy with presentations, you want to be direct and clear. As he says in a long quotation here, the vast majority of presentations fall prey to what I call the 5 cardinal sins. No clear point. The audience leaves the presentation wondering what it was all about. How many times have you sat through a presentation and at the end said to yourself, what was the point? The second point, no audience benefit. The presentation fails to show how the audience can benefit from the information presented. How many times have you sat through a presentation and repeatedly asked yourself, so what? No clear flow. The sequence of ideas is so confusing that it leaves the audience behind, unable to follow. How many times have you sat through a presentation and at some point said to yourself, wait a minute, how did the presenter get there? Too detailed. So many facts are presented, including facts that are overly technical or irrelevant, that the main point is obscured. How many times have you sat on a presentation and at some point said to yourself, what does that mean? And finally, too long. The audience loses focus and gets bored before the presentation ends. How many times have you ever heard a presentation that was too short? So again, kind of common sense stuff. But if you're looking to make better presentations, which is useful in all fields, doesn't just have to be business or personal. I mean, this right here is a presentation. I'm pitching you these books as ideas that you could read them. Or I'm even pitching you a secret second kind of option where you don't have to read them because I read you the quotes. You can gain from that just as well as you can gain from reading it. Of course, if you want more information, I suggest reading these books or reading books similar to them that would give you more information on how to make a better presentation. Presenting is something that you might not have to do right now as part of your job, but eventually you're going to have to, and sometimes the thing that you're presenting is yourself. I used to do this thing with my resumes. If I really wanted the job, I would go and learn everything about the company, and I would make them presentations. And I would say at the interview, I'd say, I've also made a presentation if we have time later. And then I would show them a presentation either about their company or how I could improve their company. And I don't care that no one else was doing this. This definitely got me the job on 2 occasions. So make a presentation. I made 2. I made one about the company and how it could be improved. I made one about myself and how I was a good fit for the company. Both the times I did that, I got the jobs. So if you put extra work in, they're going to see right away that you're the kind of person who puts extra work in. If you're really smart and you do some work for them, they're going to see that you're really smart or that you work hard. I mean, these are things you can control. So he's talking about different ways to reach the audience, different structures of flow, 7 classic opening gambits question. Let's look at that. This is 7 classic openings. So again, he's just kind of teaching you a lot of different ways to open presentations, and you can use whatever works for you. A question directed at members of the audience. Factoid, a striking statistic or little-known fact. Retrospective/prospective, a look backwards or forward. Antidote, a short human interest story. Quotation, an endorsement about your business from a respective source. Aphorism, a familiar saying. Analogy, a comparison between 2 seemingly unrelated items that helps illuminate a complex, arcane, or obscure topic. So they're just right there in that little short paragraph. That's 7 different ways that you can open your presentation. So pretty valuable, I think. And again, this book was very affordable on the Kindle. I think it was like $4 or something. And there's a lot of different ones. I'm not saying this is even the best one. I'm sure there's lots of other great presentation books. Here's just a little more. Let's see. Mies, not Mises, I said it wrong earlier. Mies directed the influential Bauhaus School of Design in Germany in the 1930s, and then came to the United States, where he designed such sleek, classic structures as the bronze and glass Seagram's building in New York City. Mies' famous less is more dictum became the guiding principle for many of the greatest designers of the past 100 years. So if there's one thing that I took away from this book, it truly is less is more. There's a great scene in L.A. Story, fantastic Steve Martin movie, where this woman's getting ready to go out. And she says what she does before she goes out is she turns around really fast and looks at herself in the mirror. And anything that stands out to her, she takes off because she doesn't want that kind of image. And I think this is a great analogy for less is more. When you read a paragraph and there's a sentence that doesn't stand out, now, of course, sometimes you're writing, for length. Sometimes the teacher's making you write for length, which is absurd and stupid. If you can do it in less words, do it in less words. It's more clear. And yes, if something sticks out in that paragraph, take it off. Take it out. When I edit my movies, and I do, they're not really movies, they're kind of remixes or mashups or whatever you want to call them. But when I edit a mashup, well, first of all, I commit to watching it. I'm going to watch that thing 10, maybe 20 times. So I got no problem watching it again and again and again to get it right. But when I see something that's wrong or something that stands out like a bad cut or a little bit of bad sound, I have to fix it, right? I mean, sometimes I have to cut it out. Sometimes I cut out whole scenes that I like to make the overall movie better. And these are sacrifices that you have to make. I also think about this during editing. When I edit text, I do 5 to 10 passes. I'm going to read the text 5 to 10 times. If I really wrote something and I release it, I don't know about perfect, but it better sound good, right? I'm going to read it out loud, right? I'm going to use all the tricks I got to make that text incredible. And reading books like this is a great way to make your text incredible. So it looks like I didn't even finish this book, so it's still in want to read. So even reading half of it, I got a lot of information out of this book. I'm going to share my 23 Kindle notes with everyone. So drink a little bit of water and talking for a long time. All right, a couple more Kindle notes, and then we're going to show you some Star Wars storyboards. Very cool. Another book I read around the same time. This is actually an espresso summary or a shortened version of the Made to Stick book. I'm not crazy about summaries, really. I don't listen to abridged audiobooks if I can help it, that kind of thing. But in this case, again, we're just trying to get more information about how to improve our presentational ability and how to be a better communicator. So kind of simple ideas here, but let's just read a couple of them. Coming up with a short, compact phrase is easy. Anybody can do it. On the other hand, coming up with a profound, compact phrase is incredibly difficult. Again, it's harder to use less words. I know that doesn't make sense. It's non-intuitive. And certainly, as a person who reads David Foster Wallace, I'm aware that you can get by with more words. More words are available, both in a dictionary sense and in just an over-descriptive sense. It's a possibility. But there's something genius about that tightness, when you get that tight phrase, To succeed, we have to take the first step, which is to be simple. Simple messages are compact and core in nature, and help people to stay away from the wrong choices by constantly reminding them of the important things. To make your ideas stickier, you need to break the guessing machine inside people and then mend it. It's pretty good stuff. It's a catchy book. I have a lot of quotes here. The reason for retelling stories is that they are full of wisdom. And I think, again, that kind of links back to this show. It's kind of a hidden thesis statement there that by retelling you even a fiction story, you can gain from it, that there is wisdom inside. And that my experience is reading these books, even if you don't want to read them, and maybe you do, and maybe you don't have time and all those things, or you read slow or something like that. There's a lot of issues. People like audiobooks. Audiobooks are cool too. The reason for retelling stories is that they are full of wisdom. So if you're interested in wisdom, if you want to get better, if you want to know more, you're going to do what the subtitle of this show says and read books so that you can get smarter. You don't even have to read the books that I'm suggesting. Read any book you want, practically, but, reasonably. So I'm going to share my 13 notes from this book, Made to Stick, an Espresso Summary. So we're moving on. I don't think I read this one, so I don't think there's going to be quotes. Chaos Monkeys, well, there's one. I think I read a sample or something. A year before, I had been hired as Facebook's first product manager for ads targeting, charged with converting Facebook's user data into money by whatever legal means available. Just a single quote there, but kind of a creepy indictment of the old Facebook. I guess I have to add this to my want to read shelf. This is another one I think I got the sample on. It's called Chaos Monkeys, Obscene Fortune and Random Failure in Silicon Valley. I was way into startups and I was reading a lot of startup books at the time. I didn't get to this one, probably because it cost $20 or something, but still, cool quote. Here we are, Infinite Jest, a difficult book. I started off with the hardback version of this book, which I still have behind me, but it was so difficult to flip back and forth between the constant footnotes that I thought this was a chance for the Kindle to really shine. And in something I don't normally do, I also bought the Kindle version of this book. So I have the hardback and the Kindle. And just like I thought, the Kindle shined with the footnotes. You click on the button, it blinks, takes you to the end of the book, 1,000 pages away. You read the footnote, takes a half a minute, click back, and it takes you right back to the narrative. This saved me a ton of time, made Infinite Jest much easier to read. Should I explain Infinite Jest to you before I show you the quotes? Maybe just a little. Okay, the title's obviously a Hamlet line, right? What infinite jest, what excellent fancy, in form and moving how expressive. So he's talking about Horatio, right? He's talking about the clown that's grave, right? He's a grave man. He's dead. What infinite jest. As he says, he delighted him. He talks about how the clown was delighting him. He's delighted by this clown. But where of his foys, his gambols now, his flings of merriment that would set the table a-roar are gone. He's talking about death. Hamlet's very serious. So in this book or film, Infinite Jest is a movie. Spoiler alert. This is a hard book. I don't know if you're going to get to it. They're never going to make a movie out of this. But Infinite Jest is a movie. A movie so addictive that if you watched it, you would completely give up your life to watch this movie over and over and over again until you died from starvation and a lack of water, right? That's how good Infinite Jest, the movie, is. It's so good that it's a joke, right? It's an infinite joke. It's a joke that goes on forever, right? You can't avoid it. You can't stop it. At one point, I think Nixon is president in the book, and he's like, "Come on, guys, just show it to me. I just want to watch it. Oh, just for a second. Oh." And they say, "Mr. President, you can't," right? And this is one of those things, like, people just can't really control themselves. Even right now with the whole going outside situation, we all know it's a bad idea. But we want to, right? Just for a little bit. And so, yeah, that's the core of the book. But in reality, it's about much, much more than that. Big spoilers. Going all in here if you want to talk about Infinite Jest. But it's about a triangle of 3 different groups of people. One group of people are at the tennis academy. And they're young, like David Foster Wallace, who studied tennis and was a semi-pro professional tennis player. They're obsessed with tennis, right? They're essentially addicted to tennis. Tennis is their life. If they are successful, they become professional tennis players. If they are unsuccessful, they become former tennis addicts, something that Wallace clearly expresses in his endless and fantastic descriptions of tennis. Truly, he understands tennis, and by reading it, I feel like I understand tennis much more than I used to. And what a beautiful game under Wallace's description. So one group is them. The other group is a halfway house, right? They just got out of rehab. They're essentially all drug addicts, right? You're sensing a theme, right? Addiction is the theme of this book. Watching the film that you can't stop watching. Even Wallace himself clearly focusing on his own addictions and his own problems. So there's the drug people, and then the third group, it doesn't make any sense, is the French-Canadian wheelchair assassins, right? And they're addicted to revenge. One of the events that happened in this book is that they kind of made a nuclear and other waste dump in upstate New York and parts of Canada. So obviously the wheelchair assassins are very upset that their land has been used for this garbage dump. The book's also in the future. They have this thing called subsidized time. This makes the book even harder to read because you don't know what year it is and what order the years come in. The year would just be YDAU, the year of the adult undergarments, right? They sponsored it. Or there's a really long one like the year of the Mashamina converter to virtual reality television that works with some televisions but not others. That would be the year. So instead of 1997, you would have YDAU, year of the Depends adult undergarments, right? So this comes up over and over again, and eventually there is a merciful and fantastic Rosetta Stone of a page that tells you the order of the years. So if you bookmark that and refer back to it, you can kind of have some idea of what's going on. But it's all about all these different people. Some of them are the people that are making the film. Some of the people are in the film. Other people are at the various addiction kind of centers in this triangle of this magnificent and massive book that will make you think, but it's very hard to read. I can tell you already, the very first chapter, this kid, he's at the tennis academy. Kid has a disease, a uniquely David Foster Wallacean disease of, I forgot the word for it, but something like lexicographer's disease. The kid's into dictionaries. The kid's into words. So he describes the shoes of everyone in the room in incredible detail for pages and pages and pages. So it's a tough read. But again, this is designed to be a tough read. This is not designed to be like a presentation. This is the complete opposite of the presentations we talked about earlier, and probably a good counterbalance, right? It's a good juxtaposition. In the presentations, you want it to be as clear as possible. In this, not that Wallace wants to be muddy, but that he's willing to take you through the depths. He's willing to walk you through it's like a Norm Macdonald long joke, right? At the end, you get a punchline. Maybe the punchline's not worth it, but it's the adventure that's worth it. And he takes you through the swamps and through the mud with all of this detail. Here's a couple quotes. These are just from the introduction. These aren't even from the real book. The book is 1,079 pages long, and there is not one lazy sentence. The guy is a bulletproof writer. Incredible. Let's see. Infinite Jest. Is it our duty to read Infinite Jest? This is a good question, and one that many people, particularly literary-minded people, ask themselves. The answer is maybe, sort of, probably, in some way. And this is a line, like I was saying, from the beginning, and I'm going to go ahead and look it up here. I stare carefully into the Kekulian knot of the middle dean's necktie. And I had to look this up back then. Kekulian, superlative, chiefly chemistry, pertaining to the system of structural formulae devised by Kekule, especially the structure of benzene molecules. And what's so great is I looked this up, and the word is so obscure. Other than the Wiktionary definition I just read you, the first result is Infinite Jest. So already, this is one of the first lines in the book. He's already using a really impossible word, right? It's not your fault for not knowing it. It's ridiculous, right? But when you look it up, it's valuable. I have 401 highlights from this book reminding you of the quality of it. I'm not going to read all of them today. I'm probably going to just go on and do some Star Wars big book type stuff. But it's fantastic. I read it in like a week. I read it every day for like 8 hours a day, like it was my job for a week. And I pounded through it. It was 1,000 pages. But yeah, Infinite Jest. I don't know if I would suggest it. It's kind of a challenge. To me, it was more accessible than Ulysses. I haven't gotten through that one yet. But here's 401 notes and highlights from Infinite Jest shared with the internet. Just like that. Boom. So you can check those out. And maybe if you guys are interested, we'll talk more about Infinite Jest later. But I get it if you're not into 1,000-page, hard-to-read, heavy novels with footnotes, right? Star Wars storyboards. The original trilogy. As you know, I only really believe in the original Star Wars trilogy. I'm an original trilogy maximalist. I don't believe they've ever been edited. There are no sequels, and there are no prequels. There's just Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Here's a little bit. Oh, I got trouble with the dust cover, but there's a little bit of Hoth for you. I don't know if you can see it. Joe Johnston is the guy's name who went on to direct Gremlins and Small Soldiers. He drew some of these storyboards. So how cool is that? Guy was a storyboard artist, got to work on Star Wars, one of the greatest movies ever made. Pretty amazing. So these have some good behind-the-scenes action in here. I'm not sure if I'm going to find it, but you'll find things like alternate versions of their clothes and meetings, events that didn't happen, the event where he goes and meets with his old buddy, that kind of thing. This is part of the Star Wars series, which fortunately, thanks to my Amazon addiction, I've ended up with all of them. I've got the making of Star Wars, the making of Empire Strikes Back, and the making of Return of Jedi, as well as this fun storyboard book that I thought went with it, and another fun book called Star Wars Propaganda that I really hope I get to show you guys in the future. It's great. Oh, look at that. You can see the Ewok. He's upside down. And you also see the great way that animation and comic books really help movies, right? And this is why when I was a kid and I was reading comic books in the 90s, I thought these things were going to be fantastic movies even then. If I had a choice when I was in the 90s, I would have wanted to make movies out of the X-Men, of course, Spider-Man, and Greek mythology. I thought the Greek mythology, the Troy, all these kind of things were fantastic for movies. And later they did, and they didn't really turn out. They even had Oliver Stone on Troy with Brad Pitt, and they couldn't make a good movie out of it. So they didn't really try on a lot of the others. So the last one here is Infinite City. This is about San Francisco. It's an atlas. That's a book of maps. And it is a book of maps. Let me see if I can find the first map for you. Like I said, she talks about the book. She talks about the city. She breaks it up into different neighborhoods. Here's an example. These are the names before the names. This is what the Native Americans used to call different parts of the Bay Area before, we went in and took it from them, right? So that's an interesting example here, the different names. And then, of course, she spends the entire chapter, what have you, talking about the Native Americans and what the land used to be like. Here's one, Green Women, Open Spaces, and Their Champions. And this is a story about the different parts of the Bay Area that have still been left green and the different women, as it turns out, who championed keeping these green spaces. So it's a neat way through a map like this to tell a history and to tell a little story that she goes on to tell. I have a couple of highlights in this book. Let's see. Once upon a time, the building of that railroad turned 4 Sacramento storekeepers, Stanford, Crocker, Huntington, and Hopkins, into San Francisco millionaires, and the Knobs, whose palaces gave Nob Hill its name. And the Railroad Corporation, one of the first modern corporations, became a monstrous force, a python wrapped around California, squeezing it for money, controlling its movements, and setting its policy. So that's pretty interesting. She's got a chapter about the railroads and the kind of the robber barons and the people who created this system. Here's one, Butterfly Habitats and Queer Public Spaces. So again, this is San Francisco map, so you got to expect something like this. But what an interesting mixture of butterfly habitats and queer spaces. And then she goes on, I mean, it's been a long time since I read this, but I assume she goes on to talk about both together in the chapter. So it's a really interesting book. This is a Mexican look at a Hispanic look at San Francisco, and very interesting. Que quiero es más, something like that. It said, Quieren se soy donde. So my bookmarks are falling out of this book. But check it out. It's called Infinite City, a San Francisco Atlas. I actually saw it in a waiting room once at a cool startup, and I was like, oh, that is cool. And then I saw it at City Lights Books over there in San Francisco, the place that Lawrence Ferlinghetti writes his poems, where they published Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg used to hang out there. So it's very cool to get from City Lights Books. And it was printed by the University of Berkeley. So there's your other big book for the day. As for what else I've been reading, we're over the hour timeline, so we're going to head towards the end of this show. But let's see. I've also been reading. I finished Man's Search for Meaning. It turns out it had 20 pages of footnotes, or 20% footnotes, so that was a surprise. Book is done. Very much enjoyed it. It was a difficult read. The man's in a concentration camp, but it's about learning from him and from his attitude and from his strength and his philosophy that helped him get through it. So a really good book. I suggest Man's Search for Meaning, even if it is difficult. And the reason I read it is it was recommended by 3 or more people. And whenever that happens now, I pretty much give up and try to read whatever they tell me or watch whatever it is right away. That's how I found great stuff like Rick and Morty, Midnight Gospel, other things like that I've been watching. I don't know, Kimmy Schmidt's okay. But I also read Philip K. Dick, The Game Players of Titan. This was a surprisingly good one. I liked Philip K. Dick even better when the titles are out of control. In the future, we've kind of been conquered by aliens, and the aliens are making us play kind of a version of poker and Monopoly called Bluff. And if you win at Bluff, you get territory and land, like Berkeley. If you lose all your territory and land. So it was pretty cool. And I got that Philip K. Dick book with a Kindle Unlimited program. It's a pretty sweet deal, $10 a month, something like that. You get access to Amazon's library of books, which at the time included all of the Philip K. Dick books. So that was excellent. Check those out. I also read The Kitchen Readings, The Untold Stories of Hunter S. Thompson, which is more like stories told by his buddies. So it's not as well written as his stuff, but it's a nice way to get behind the scenes and learn more about Dr. Hunter S. Thompson. So he was great. I read The Man Who Japed, Philip K. Dick book about the ability of a man's sense of humor to transform his society, and that no one else had this power. And japing is a means to mimic or copy, to mock. It's a satire word. He japed a statue by cutting its head off and then putting its head in its hands. And that was, of course, a big deal because it was a political statue. Let's see. I also read A Warning by Anonymous, behind-the-scenes book by a Trump person in the Trump White House who does not approve of what's going on. He's also the same person who published the New York Times editorials warning us about what was going on. It's a very strong and stark warning that reads even more true in the current catastrophe. And I read Philip K. Dick's Maze of Death. Again, the worse the title, the better the book. But that one wasn't that great. But pretty straightforward, kind of a twist ending. Interesting paranoia, and so on and so forth. But it was a Dick book, right? It's a Philip K. Dick book. Here's the cover for a supposedly fun thing I'll never do again, Essays by David Foster Wallace. And that's about it. I talked about most of the other books that I've been reading earlier. This one doesn't have a cover, so I want to highlight it. It's called Terry Gilliam's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Jean Gregortis. And it was a nice behind the scenes of Hunter S. Thompson's movie and the woman who used to date him who ended up making the film. So pretty cool stuff. I also read some comic books and stuff because Kindle Unlimited also gets you access to graphic novels like these Batman books and these X-Men books. So thanks to everybody for joining us. Thanks for giving us a thumbs up and a share. I just wanted to talk about books today. It's Sunday. What are you reading? What have you read recently that's good? Let me know in the comments. Chat is good. Comments are better. Comments last longer. More people see them. You kind of have to wait till the show ends, and you have to come back. Then you have to make a comment, which is why no one makes comments on live shows. But if you want to, about your books, I would be glad to read them and to see what you're into and what you've been reading. What did you think of these books? Were there any of these books where you're like, oh, I got to go read that right away? Is anyone going to take on the challenge of Infinite Jest? And I do mean it's a challenge. Like, I mean, it is frustrating. Like, I mean, I remember reading the first 5-10 pages with the descriptions of the shoes. And I was like, I'm not going to make it through this. But there's something tantalizing, right, about that film. Right? And again, the film's not really even the core of the thing. I mean, he gets to it. He explains it. There's a massive footnote with James Incandeza's filmography, right? He faked. He created from his mind and then put into the words 20, 30 different film synopsises for films that don't exist because you were just desperate to find out more about this filmmaker, to understand this film, Infinite Jest. And he keeps throwing other things that maybe aren't about the film at you. And he just keeps, because it's not really about the film, it's about addiction. And it's powerful. It's a powerful book. It could kill a cockroach too. It's heavy. It's thick. Powerful. But yeah, check out Infinite Jest. David Foster Wallace. Clearly a big book. This was Big Book Sunday. Thumbs up and a share. Subscribe down below if you like this kind of show. Hit the bell for notifications. Normally we talk about cryptocurrency, but it's Sunday, so I thought it'd be fun to talk about books. So thanks so much for joining us. Until next time, bye-bye.